What is up, guys? Week 8 is here of college football. We're getting closer to the college football playoffs. But Trent is here with me now. Alec will join in a bit. Trent, we had some big games last week. Obviously, lost to UNC. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. I think we're going to talk about the college football playoff stuff next week and start to get into that. We're going to talk about the games one more week here. But let's dive right in, man. Obviously, 2 weeks ago, was looking real high. They were on top of the world. Then they had that really bad loss to Georgia Tech. But we brought it up last week and said, hey, look, if they win the rest of their games, it's kind of like a clean slate. They could still get into the ACC championship and see what they can do from there. First quarter was pretty good. Tyler Van Dyke got absolutely blown away on a play and threw a perfect touchdown pass. And then after the first quarter, it really went downhill. Obviously, this game was in Chapel. We all predicted well, actually, no, I predicted to win. I actually thought they were going to win that game. You guys took North Carolina. You guys were right on that one. What were your thoughts on that game, man?
Actually, I think it was the first half. I think that first half they were winning at the end of the first half. Um, you know, we picked UNC just because, more I think just because UNC is the better team, less because of the prior week, embarrassing defeat. But this was just an embarrassing loss, I originally picked UNC, like I said, because I thought they were the better team, but UNC didn't look very good at all in that game, and was just making mistake after mistake after mistake, and it was just really really tough to watch. I mean, you're talking about fumbles at the goal line, really bad 15-yard penalties, whether it's on players or coaches, and it was just like they could not get out of their own way, and that's just not what winning teams do. Uh, and it was just like an avalanche. It got worse and worse all game. Their offense didn't really pick back up until really it was out of reach. So, I liked what I saw from Van Dyke at some points. He made some really nice throws, but he also made mistakes. Um, Defense really didn't really impress me too much. But again, it's really hard to win when you make just all the mistakes that they made throughout the entire course of the game. And I know Restrepo was interviewed during this week, and he said things that they're focused on in practice the most is the self-inflicted wounds, and that's it. I mean, that is really the reason why they lost and played so poorly against UNC. If they take away those mistakes, it's a brand new game. They might even win that game. I mean, fumbling the ball at the 1 yard line as you're crossing the goal line, it really is inexcusable. Um, and I mean, just 15-yard penalties off of a third down stop, multiple penalties on third down. It's just like really, really, really frustrating when that happens. So, I mean, if they can clean that stuff up, which who knows if they can, but if they can clean it up, they give themselves, they have a fighting chance against everyone they play. Obviously, they have Clemson next week, and we know Clemson's been struggling, but Clemson doesn't play football like that. Clemson's going to play clean in the sense that they're not going to make that many mistakes. And if we're making those mistakes, there's zero chance, and you will get blown out. And
Yeah.
UNC took advantage all game.
Yeah, man. I think a lot of the Canes fans, I'm sure you are, me too, we're tired of the what ifs. I mean, these are games they got to win. It is year two. You can still say it's a little early, but next year, these are games that Cristobal's got to win. I mean, this has got to be cleaned up. I'm still willing to give him a benefit of the doubt. Look, and for all the people calling for his name, let's get that out of here. It's never gonna happen. You got to be patient. So with all these top programs, man, you just got to give it some time. Obviously, it wasn't the best. You're completely right. That 1 yard fumble is inexcusable. It's got to be cleaned up. But there is a world, man. If they clean all that crap up, they're 6-0 going into this week. So that's the bright side. I mean, the talent is there. I think the execution can be there, but Cristobal has also got to clean it up as well. I think some of his game management has been pretty bad. But look, man, Rome wasn't built in one day. It's going to take some time, but there are some positives that I saw, and that's really all that matter. Obviously, Van Dyke won't be back next year. We're going to have to figure out that. But overall,
I don't know about that. I don't
maybe
know.
yeah. Actually, you know what? Maybe he could come back.
I
You
don't
don't
know
know.
about that. I mean, he had 391 4 TDs, which obviously on the stat sheet looks very impressive. But you know, it's really hard to get a read on TBD because he's up and down every game. I mean, he was horrendous against Georgia Tech. He looked a lot better here against North Carolina. And I mean, Drake May threw less than 50% of completion percentage and 273. He did have the 4 touchdowns, but like That's all you can ask when you're playing Drake May. You held under 300 yards, under 50% completion percentage, and they still put 41 on you. And a lot of that is because of turnovers and stupid mistakes. So it's hard to it's easy to say, oh, they just clean that up, they'll be fine. But it's a lot harder than that. And I just don't know if they will. It's been 2 games in a row where they've really been making a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. On the other side of UNC, look, they're 6-0. We all talked about Drake May. He's obviously an elite quarterback prospect. He's projected to go top 3 in the NFL draft. Worst case, top 5. The guy is as good as it gets as a quarterback. He played well, but I thought that was, you said it best, man. I thought that was a very winnable game, and they just kind of threw it away in a tough environment. Next year, Miami gets UNC at home, and those are the games that you expect to win. So, still has a lot to play for. They could still get a decent bowl game here. A lot of positives that could still come out of the season. Obviously, Clemson's up next. We'll talk about that later. But any last words on that game, Trent?
UNC is a good team. They got back Tez Walker, who is a monster, and he showed it against Miami, honestly, the last 2 weeks. But they really didn't show up that much. UNC, that was a very, very winnable game. And that's 2 in a row now that they could be undefeated right now, and they're not because of their own mistakes. And that's demoralizing on the team. So we'll see if it sticks with them going forward.
Yeah. All right, let's get to another honestly, kind of a surprising game just because of the way he played. That's USC against Notre Dame. Caleb Williams probably had the worst game. I don't want to be too, dramatic here, but that's probably the worst game he's played in his life. I mean, guy threw I think it was 3 picks. Didn't look too well. I mean, yeah. He there is a knock on Caleb. He really needs to know when to throw the ball away. But in terms of game plan, I thought Notre Dame executed perfectly. They Marcus Freeman had a great plan, rushed the quarterback, run it up the middle, showcase what that defense on USC is really like, and they got it absolutely exposed. I thought that was one of the best games Notre Dame played in a long time. Executed really well, and they got a really big win. It kind of sucks that Notre Dame couldn't win last week because they would be right in the discussion to make the playoff, but with 2 losses, it's going to be tough. But nonetheless, great win for Notre Dame. And look, we talked about it last year. Alec has mentioned a lot on the pod about Lincoln Riley. We all know how he feels about it, but Trey, you started to lean a little bit that way as well, and I am too. And dude, at some point, you just gotta accept it for what it is. He just doesn't have a defense every year. The guy's obviously one of the best offensive minds in college football, but when you have 4 Heisman quarterbacks in the last 6 years, and you just can't win the big game, it's very concerning, man.
Yeah, Lincoln had a tight leash with me going into this year. I gave him the benefit of the doubt with year 1, but it's hard to now, man. I mean, the talent that this guy has, it's hard to explain. All the disappointment. Like you said, that was probably the worst game Caleb Williams has ever had, maybe his entire life, probably since middle school. And look, we said going in, this, USC hadn't played anybody before this game. I mean, they had given up really close games to Colorado and Arizona. And this was going to be one of their toughest games and one of their toughest defenses they played all year. And it showed. I mean, this team, they were not prepared for a team like Notre Dame at all. And, it's very, very concerning going forward because they still got to play a lot more good teams. They still got to play Oregon. They still got to play Utah. So, obviously, you can expect Caleb Williams to play better than he did against Notre Dame, way better. But this is a Lincoln Riley team and a Lincoln Riley defense, and they just can't get stops, and it just snowballs every year. They'll beat the bad teams, but they cannot beat the good teams. So we've seen it time and time again. It's just at the point where you just have the reality is Lincoln isn't cut out, to make it that far in the postseason. And we're seeing it, in front of our eyes, and that's just it. I mean, USC's flashy; they got all the flashy talent. They got Caleb Williams. They have the Heisman's. Lincoln's always had the Heisman's, but at the end of the day, it means nothing because he just can't win.
Yeah, and you know what, Trent? He's going to keep getting these quarterbacks because honestly, what quarterback wouldn't want to play in his offensive system? But dude, at some point, you just gotta find a way to get a defense, man. I mean, hand over the reins to someone who's very experienced. I mean, all the guys he hires are always mid-tier or just starting out. I think he really needs to figure out what he's going to do this offseason. But for USC, their season's not over. They still have a gauntlet of games, and they win
Sure.
those games, they're right back in it. The Pac-12 is wide open, man. There's like, I think it's probably the most exciting division this year in college football. If we're being honest, man. The talent is unreal. But on Notre Dame side, real quick, look, Hartman played great. I feel bad for Hartman. I really want him to have a chance to contend. He came back and gave up some NFL offers to come back, and 2 losses. Like I said, it's very hard. Maybe there's a crack in the door, but I don't see it. There is always a chance, but yeah, man, just in terms of win, it's as big as they get at home. Marcus Freeman needed this win, and yeah, they played well, man. But for USC, there's a lot more questions than answers right now, but they do have a chance to redeem themselves and still get in that playoff spot, which is good news for them. And I'm never going to doubt Caleb Williams, man. The guy's incredible. But you're right, dude. He played the worst game probably of his life. So
Yeah. And look, I mean, Notre Dame's good. Sam Hartman didn't even play that great. He just played mistake football, was always in control. I mean, he did what you're supposed to do when your defense does their job. I mean,
yep.
if USC's whole game is they're gonna outscore you. And when they're performing like that on offense and the defense is just pretty much shutting them down, you just gotta play mistake-free football on offense, right the ship, and that's exactly what Sam Hartman did. Running backs did their job. Estime for Notre Dame is a monster. He's got to be one of the best running backs in the country. He had 2 touchdowns, so it was just easy because USC can't score. There's no chance that they can win because their defense is just not going to be able to get the stops that they need.
Yeah, you're right. All right, let's get to another game, man. That was the game of the week. Really, I watched from first quarter all the way in. I got off my couch once to get some water, but that's Oregon, Washington. That game lived up to the hype. Kind of sucks that there had to be a loser in this game because they both played well. It was exciting. For those of you guys who didn't know who Michael Penix is, you guys do now. He is legitimate. He is the Heisman favorite for a reason. He was the Heisman favorite coming into that game, and he pretty much solidified it. Still half a season left to go, but he's the clear favorite right now. Trent, man, first quarter, he threw an absolute couple of dots down the line. Then Oregon came back and took the lead, and when Washington needed Penix the most, he made some unbelievable throws to win that game. Trent, this guy's legit, man. Not only to win the Heisman, but to win the national championship. They have that good of a team. He's that good of a player. They got to clean it up on the defensive end, but they look pretty scary, man. They really do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any question these are the 2 best teams in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
This was just a really good game. I'm not really hanging my head too much if I'm Oregon because they also played a very good football
in
game.
Washington.
They lost to a great team at home. And honestly, the difference might have been the Dan Lanning 4th down calls. He went for it a lot on 4th.
That's big. Yeah, you're right.
Board, and that ended up biting them in the ass at the end. But Penix is the truth. He's the clear-cut favorite now to win the Heisman. One after this performance and Caleb's performance against Notre Dame. I'd be shocked if at this point Penix does not win. It's his to lose. And I'm not sure who Washington has to play the rest of the year. I think they have to play USC, Utah, Oregon State, Washington. They don't have the easiest schedule, but they can win all those games. I think it's safe to say Washington's a favorite to make the CFP as of right now. And honestly, maybe Oregon too. Oregon is a really good team, and they can absolutely win out, and they can see Washington in the Pac-12.
And by the way, quote unquote, this is a good loss for them because they did lose in Washington by 3 points.
For sure.
In that environment.
Yeah, you honestly, you can't have a better loss if you're Oregon.
Yeah,
it's a game they could have won, but they didn't against a very good team against the likely Heisman. And let me tell you, Washington's got some talent. They got some receivers making catches all over the place, making very tough catches. So Washington right now, I think, is the team to beat. They're probably the hottest team in football. But I think it's safe to say that was the game of the year so far.
Yeah, you're completely right. Lanning, I think I'm not sure if it was 3, but I know for a fact there was 2 times he could have taken field goals, and he trusted Bo Nix and his team to get it, and they just couldn't get over the first down or the touchdown. And by the way, man, as we've seen time and time again, taking points on the road is always important. You got to do it, and they didn't do it here. And in that environment, they lost. But let's be fair; they played well enough to win. Penix just made some great plays at the end. They really did.
Also, I want to note Penix wasn't even fully healthy. He was struggling all game. I couldn't tell if it was something in his midsection or ribs, but he was hurt. Like he was getting hit and he was hurt. Like he clearly was not 100%, and still making the plays that he was making. It was incredible.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, Trent. He made himself a lot of money this weekend because
Yeah.
he's now he might be a top 15 pick. There was a lot of scouts there at that game to watch both of them. I believe there was like 15 to 16 NFL scouts I read online somewhere that they attended this game. So big for both sides. They both played well.
And Oregon's a good defense too. I mean, they're no slouch. We know what Lanning's reputation is as a coordinator on defense, and I mean, they made Shadir Sanders look silly when they played Sanders in Colorado,
Yep.
and Penn just came out and it was like nothing.
Yeah, man, you're right. You hit the nail on the head on that. So yeah, it was a great game. Lots to root for. Still plenty of season left. The Pac-12 is definitely going to get interesting here. Let's get to another game, Trent, and that is Arkansas at Alabama. Alabama nearly escaped with a loss there. They ended up getting the win in Tuscaloosa. Look, they played well enough to win. I think we got to be patient with Alabama. It's always very hard when you have these, freshman quarterbacks coming in to these kind of environments and expect them to play well. I mean, Bryce Young did it. It's hard, man. Not everyone can live up to that hype. It's so much pressure. But look, they only lost one game. Still plenty of season left. There is a world where they can make the playoff. I think it's very feasible they can make the SEC championship game. But what were your thoughts on this game and our buddy KJ Jefferson?
Yeah, I mean, this pod is notorious for being KJ Jefferson stands. Arkansas is always a team that's going to fight. We know Sam Pittman. We know that, he always teaches his teams that, they're going to be in every game. They certainly were here. Clearly, Alabama is just not the same team, whether it's a freshman quarterback or Saban or whatever. Bryce Young also had quite the weapons when he was playing as well. We can't forget about that. But I think it was just a combination of Arkansas being a gritty team and Alabama just not being the same. And we know that KJ is good enough to win, every game he plays in. If he plays with potential, he's a big quarterback. It's hard to take down and is a playmaker. But Alabama was just able to get enough juice at the end of the game to pull it out. Even though, I mean, Arkansas scored, Alabama didn't score in the fourth quarter. They only had 3 points in the second half. I don't want to say it's concerning yet on Bama, but this is not encouraging to see them play this poorly at this point of the season. I mean, they haven't been ranked this low. I couldn't tell you the last time they've looked this bad. And I mean, I know they're 6-1, which is crazy, but we're talking at least a decade since we've seen an Alabama team that just looks like they have no shot of winning any big game. But it could just be it could just be a year. It could just be that Milroe needs another year to develop and more talent acquisition around him. But I just don't think this is the year for Alabama.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is, man. I think we've been spoiled with such great freshman quarterbacks over the years that we just need to find a way to relax and have some realistic expectations. Like I said, man, it's really hard to come into an environment like that of all the pressure of winning. And the reality is, you said it, they are 6-1. They have one loss, but Milton hasn't been the reason why they're playing bad. I mean, there's also other aspects of too. But look, they're 6-1. They have a chance to be in the playoff under a Nick Saban Alabama team, one of the greatest franchises in college sports, and one of the greatest, arguably the greatest college coach of all time. So I mean, they still have a lot to play for this year. I'm never going to rule out Alabama in any game in any scenario. So yeah, right. But yeah, man, you never know. All right, last game before we move on to next week, and that is UCLA against Oregon State. Now, don't look now, Trent, but they are now ranked number 12. They're 6-1. DJs, we all know, transferred to this school, and they're playing well, man. They won 36-24 over UCLA, who I think we all took. I think you guys took UCLA to win.
Yep.
And I took Oregon State. I got tired of going against them. Finally panned out. But Oregon State looks for real, man. There's also a pathway for them to get in if they play their cards right. What do you think of that game, real quick?
Yeah, might sound crazy, but the Pac-12 might be the best conference in football. I don't think I've ever shut the doors in my entire life. there's just a lot of good teams. And the reason I picked UCLA was just because the offense, I didn't think that Oregon State would be able to contain them as much. Dante Moore played really well up until that point. And Oregon State's defense really held strong. I mean, Dante Moore, they got the forced 3 turnovers from Dante. And DJ was not bad. DJ played a pretty damn good game. So yeah, Oregon State is going to be a problem going forward. I still wouldn't put them in the same category as an Oregon or a Washington, but let's actually look at the Pac-12 standings real quick, because this could get interesting down the line.
Dude, there's a gauntlet of games for all these teams. I know USC scheduled stuff. I know Washington, as you talked about earlier, is tough. Utah is a tough schedule.
I mean, Oregon State, they're in third right now. They have to play Washington and Oregon. They play both of them. This could get interesting down the line. Again, like I said, I don't think they're necessarily better than both of those teams, but they get Washington at home. If they're able to pull out an upset there, the college football is going to get turned upside down. But they're a force right now. Washington and Oregon have to take them very seriously because they're playing really good football right now, and they just shut down a really good UCLA offense. So I'm pretty impressed with Oregon State right now.
Is there a world where you think two teams from the Pac-12 can make the playoff, or is that stretching it?
I think it's stretching it now because you only have one undefeated Pac-12 team.
Correct.
Which is Washington. So if Washington and Oregon hypothetically had never played each other, and then they played each other, let's say that was the Pac-12 game this last week, I would have expected both of them to be in the playoff.
Yeah, but considering the way they lost, it's going to be
Washington undefeated. It's going to be tough.
It's going to be interesting, man. If there was ever the year the expansion started, I wish it was this year. It would have been a lot of fun, but it's still going to be chaos down the road.
I think still the favorite to have two teams is probably Big Ten because of Ohio State and Michigan. It's going to be hard to keep them both out. If one is undefeated, the other one's one loss came to the other team. But I mean, the Pac-12 is loaded, man. They have a lot of good teams.
I will say this: that Michigan-Ohio State game is going to be big because if one of those teams loses by 14 plus, I think you got a different conversation. But you also have to remember Penn State could beat Ohio State this weekend, which we're going to talk about in a second. That's going to really shake things up.
We'll see on that one. I don't
yeah.
know.
All right, on to this week's game. Alex here to join us. What's up, my man?
Happy to be here. Sorry I'm late.
No, we're gonna get to the good stuff now. So let's get right into it. Alec and Trent's buddy James Franklin with one of the biggest games of his career, going up to Ohio State. They're both undefeated. James Franklin is Penn State. Nittany Lions are number 6. Not surprised by their schedule, but man, this is a really big game for Franklin. Quite honestly, I think he needs this before you start to hear some rumbles going on. Alec, I'll start you first, man. What are your expectations for this game? What do you see happening? And do you think Penn State can finally get that big win under James Franklin's resume here?
Well, the fans that follow this podcast know my opinion of James Franklin. And I don't think too highly of the guy. I don't, not to say that he's a bad coach, because they've had really good teams. He did very well when he was coach at Vanderbilt, and then Penn State has done really well.
Missouri.
Sorry?
Wasn't he at Missouri?
Maybe it was one of those teams that with similar colors. Anyway, they built the program back up after the whole Paterno scandal. Things weren't going too well. But if there's ever a time that he could overcome this hump that he's been dealing with for years and win this big game, beat Ohio State, it would be this year. I think Ohio State has improved since, earlier on in the season. They played a close game against Notre Dame, and a couple other closer games earlier in the season. They're starting to put it together. Offensively, I know they have one of the best defenses, but Penn State has, I think, a top 5 defense this year. So they have all the tools. I don't know about their offensive capacity. I know they've been putting up big numbers, but like Robert said, they haven't really played anyone too up to their level. So this game is at Ohio State, I think.
Noon game.
big thing. I think, you know, they both teams have 100,000 plus capacity in their stadiums, so there's a home field advantage for sure. I just don't believe in Franklin. I'll believe it when I see it, and I haven't seen it yet. So I'm gonna pick Ohio State to win this game. But I could see it being close.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's going to be an interesting game for sure. Trent, what are your thoughts?
So just a quick thing before I get into Penn State is that, I don't think Ohio State is anything too special this year. We've seen them play on the big stage multiple times. I think they've taken a step back from last year when they had Stroud. And I mean, Ryan Day is not exactly the biggest winner of big games either. So it's kind of who's going to be the bigger bum here. But going on to Franklin, I have some stats here. Franklin is that's gone. Franklin is 2-11 on the road versus top 25 teams, 0-9 on the road versus top 10 teams, 1-8 versus Ohio State, and 1-11 versus top 5 teams. So this guy is quite literally the worst coach in terms of big games. James Franklin in a big game is like Justin Herbert, game-winning drives. It's just like not going to work out. So for that reason and those facts alone, I'm going to pick Ohio State because he just does not show up in big games. They never seem to win these big games. And I know that you could probably say the same thing about Ryan Day and Ohio State right now, but it's in Ohio State. Like Alex said, there's going to be 100,000+. I think it's 110,000+ in that stadium. So I have to go with Ohio State here by default.
Yeah, I mean it's battle of the bums, right? At the end of the day,
There's battle of the bums.
battle of the bums. Ryan Day, he won a big game earlier this year, and I'm curious,
But you shouldn't.
how I would pick this game if the game is at Penn State. Like maybe they could pull it off as a Penn State. I think that being at home for Ohio State is huge for them in this one. And that may end up being the deciding factor. But I think it was in the last 3-4 years, they had a game come down to the wire. I think Penn State missed a field goal or something where they could have gone to overtime. So I think they'll be ready,
You know, if this game was a primetime game, I would give Penn State a chance. But every single time we start to believe in Penn State and James Franklin, that's when it all falls apart. I don't see a change in here. I think Ohio State is good enough to win this game. Obviously, they have some quarterback questions, but we saw in the Notre Dame game when they need a drive, he comes up clutch. Not to say that Penn State is not a bad team, but until I see it, man, I got to see it to believe it. I'm going to choose Ohio State here. I just have no confidence in James Franklin to win this type of game. And although he's great for his Zoom altercations on that question, don't ask him to throw a deep ball because he'll go off on you. But other than that, yeah, man, I'm taking Ohio State here. And you guys,
I think that's unanimous across the board.
Yeah. All right, Alec. Sweet. So with that said, let's get into another great game here. Unfortunately, I wish it was under different circumstances, but UM is going into the season now 4-2 against Clemson. I don't think anyone saw this coming, but it's just a completely unranked game. But in Death Valley, Trent, I'll start with you first, man. What are your expectations? Do you think UM's finally going to get that big win on Clemson, or you think it's going to be another year of a loss?
UM the last 2 games is playing exactly how I expected them to play before the season started. It's hard to have confidence in this team right now. Just the amount of mistakes they're making and the quality of their performance it's really hard confident going into this game because as much as Clemson has struggled, they're still ultra talented. They're still well coached, and they just don't make the same amount of mistakes. They just don't make those crucial mistakes throughout the course of the game. So, look, who knows? Another Miami team could show up and play clean football and not make crucial mistakes and dominate the line, but I don't see it happening. I'm going to pick Clemson here. If Miami had beaten North Carolina, maybe I'd feel differently about this, but they didn't, and they looked poorly while doing it. So I think Clemson Clemson comes in and wins, and Miami needs a win, man. Like so crucially, they need a win. Just I don't think they'll get it here, but there's still plenty of ball left after this game. They're gonna have to put some win togethers to end the season. Obviously, they still have to play FSU, but I don't. It doesn't look good right now.
Yeah.
I like Clemson.
I'll go real quick here. It kind of sucks that this game's in Death Valley because honestly, Clemson has a lot of their own questions to answer here as well. They have not been playing great either. They've escaped a couple of wins. But if this game was honestly, I'm just taking the home team here. If this game was on the road for Clemson.
The game is in Miami.
It is in Miami. Oh, okay. In that case, I'm taking Miami then. Look, man, Clemson has a lot of questions to answer themselves. I know hasn't been the sharpest tool. I don't want to sound like a homer here. I know I did it last week when they went into UNC and lost, but I still think UM's due for a big win here. I think Van Dyke is good enough to win this game. I know Cristobal's hearing, the whispers in the background. I think they can do it, man. This is simply because I'm taking the home team here. If this was in Death Valley, I'd take Clemson, as you guys just saw 10 seconds ago. It's going to be close. It's going to be hard fought, but Trent, you're completely right, man. They need this win. They really, really do. Just to give the fans some confidence here. So I'm going to believe. I have no choice to believe. I got to believe in the Cristobal era, and I hope he gets it done, man. Alec, how about you?
I disagree. First, I mean, no disrespect, but Miami does not have a home field advantage like some of these other teams in college football. That's one.
Yeah, correct.
Pretty sure for the Georgia Tech game, a lot of those people that went to that game got a free ticket because they bought a ticket for the I think so. That may not be.
No, that's completely accurate. Yes.
I had to mention that. But so I don't know. Will they show up and fill out the stadium? Not likely. I'm sure it'll be, a decent crowd, but considering that they lost the last 2 weeks, not as big as it could have been if they were undefeated. So I don't know how much that'll play into it. Clemson, I think, is in a mindset where it's like they can't lose another game all season. And I'm sure that Miami is in that mindset too. But I've seen some good things out of Clemson. They played really well against Florida State, as we saw. And since then, they've been able to take care of business. I think that they're the better team. Probably a little more deep talent-wise. I mean, I'm sure they match up talent-wise, but a lot more depth on Clemson's side. I know that Miami, again, they need somewhat of a morale boost. Obviously, they had 2 tough losses, and I think Van Dyke is somewhat hobbled or iffy with an injury that he was dealing with. I know he was limping early on in that game against North Carolina and fought through. So I don't know if this is the game where they turn it around. I think that I'm picking Clemson to win this game. If they do lose this game, that'd be 3 in a row, but it's not the end of the world by any means. You just got to keep your eyes on the prize and hopefully rebound against an easier team and then be ready when they go and play Florida State. But I think I got to go with Dabo and the Tigers for this one.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's get into another interesting game. Alec has some words to chime in on USC and Utah. But Alec, I'll give you the floor, man. Obviously, Trent and I talked about it earlier. For the fans listening, we said that this was the worst game that Caleb Williams probably played in his life. I mean, he's extremely talented, but that whole team finally got put on blast, as you've mentioned in the last couple of years. I mentioned with Trent earlier in the pod about look. At some point, it is what it is. Lincoln Riley just can't get a defense. We always know he's going to get the top quarterback because what quarterback wouldn't want to play in his system? It gets you to the NFL, and you're going to be very, very talented in that system. But man, defensively, he just cannot get it together. It doesn't matter who he hires or what players he gets; they just can never put it together. It's bizarre. It's odd. I don't know what it is. So, Alec, I'll give you your thoughts on this, man.
Well, it's interesting because I think last week was a little bit different. I don't think you could put the loss entirely. I mean, I don't think you could put the loss entirely on Lincoln Riley or on the defense. They gave up a kick return for a touchdown. I think Caleb Williams threw a pick 6. One, or if not, they took it back, close. Notre Dame scored off of all 3 interceptions that he threw. the game, Caleb Williams was the reason why they lost that game, which is surprising, because he's been the best thing really in college football, and he kind of it seems to it seems that he has thrown away his Heisman chances with a performance like that. We'll see if he could rebound. So that was different than what I've seen out of USC. The fact that they weren't able to put up a lot of numbers on the offensive side, and obviously it's tough playing in Notre Dame. But that's last week. This week they're going against Utah, who is now they do have Cam Rising back. This is the same Utah team that beat USC twice last year, or maybe I'm wrong about that, but they definitely beat them once in the Pac-12 championship. And I think Coach Kyle Whittingham has Lincoln Riley's number. USC is going to be looking to rebound after last week, but it was a pretty abysmal performance. And I think that Utah is on the rise. So for that reason, I'm going to pick Utah to win this game.
Yeah. How about you, Trent?
Are we sure about Cam Rising? Is that a fact?
Pretty sure.
I didn't know that. Look, this is tough. USC is favored by 7, which is pretty large. I thought more than I thought it'd be. This game is in LA, night game. I expect Caleb Williams to play astronomically better than he did against Notre Dame. And we've seen that Utah can score on bad defenses, which is the concern because USC is a bad defense. But Utah, I don't think Utah's defense is the same caliber as Notre Dame. So this could be a shootout. Especially with Cam Rising back, I think this can be a shootout. But if it is a shootout, I'm going to pick the gunslinger and go with USC. Because I think it's very, very hard to outscore USC when they're scoring so much, and I think this is going to be a bounce back game for Caleb Williams because he kind of got embarrassed last week. But I like USC here. I think USC is just going to be a little too much offensively for Utah. But I think it's certainly going to be a test. Utah is no slouch, so I think it'll actually be a pretty good game. But I'm gonna pick USC at the end.
Yeah, Alex just put in the chat that it's not confirmed yet, but maybe we'll see him, maybe we'll not. But regardless, it's not going to change my pick. I think we just saw a one-off game from Caleb Williams. I think he's going to come back and show the world why he's the number 1 pick this year. Like I said, he played the worst game of his life last week. Not to say that Utah isn't a great team, but I just think USC is going to flat out win. I think their offense is going to come to life. I think we're going to see a shootout here. I just think at the end of the day, at home, USC will take care of business and still keep their playoff hopes alive.
I'm telling you this right now. If Utah wins this game, they won't. But there should be legitimate concerns about their head football coach and their vision moving forward, because there is no more excuses for this team to lose. This is a game they should win. And they cannot be losing games that they should win. So
yeah,
someone's going to have to start asking questions.
Alec, I'm going to ask you a question. I asked this earlier to Trent, but I'll bring it up to you. And to the viewers at home is pretty aware of this as well. I get a lot of DMs about it as well. How can Lincoln Riley the last 5 years have 4 Heisman quarterbacks and just not win the big game? It's if you gave these quarterbacks to any of these elite coaches, I guarantee you one of the 4 years they're going to win a championship. It's astronomical. I just don't understand how he just can't do it, dude.
I can't think of a team that's ever won a national championship, or at least in recent memory, that didn't have a dominant defense. So that's they say defense wins championships, obviously, but that has always been his bugaboo, and they're able to win plenty of games in the regular season. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, you need to be able to rely on your defense. So that's the reason why they haven't won. And what doesn't make sense to me is why he can't make a pitch at a top defensive coordinator, a guy to come from the pros to be the defensive coordinator. You're the final piece. Once we bring you in, we'll be able to finally get over this hump. And it's almost like he's not interested in it. It's like it's not a concern. We're just going to outscore the other team. We don't have to worry about defense. Well, clearly he's learning that that's not the case. And in a situation which is very rare, like last week where they weren't able to score 50 points, you don't have a shot against a Notre Dame team that was playing well and that was on fire. So um, I don't know if he'll change. He better because like Trent was saying, this is supposed to be the year for them. They're gonna need to win out. And if they don't make a playoff, that's a real problem.
Especially with we all talked about that he has the reigning Heisman favorite. We talked about generational quarterback. It's more than just that. He has great receivers. He's got a solid line. I mean, you have enough to win there. And the fact you can't do it 2 years in a row with arguably the best quarterback in the last 20 years we've seen, or at least since Andrew Luck, it's pretty sad to not even make a playoff. So bigger concerns there. We're gonna talk a lot about it all next week when we start doing our playoff analysis here. But yeah, I wanted Alec to chime in on that real quick. Let's get to a couple more games before we get on out of here. Next game, which is pretty, Trent and I mentioned earlier about Alabama. There still is a chance for them to make it. They still got that logo. Anything's possible with them, and that is another test for them. That is Alabama and Tennessee in Tuscaloosa. Who do you see winning that game, Alec, and what are your expectations?
Revenge game. Revenge game for Alabama. They've had this one marked on their calendars since they had a tough loss at Tennessee last year. Tennessee is not, to me, in my opinion, Tennessee is not a top team in college football. They're not the same without Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt on the offensive front. They're dealing with Joe Milton, who seemingly has regressed as the season has gone on. Obviously, he had a terrible performance against Florida, which I got to see firsthand. They're not the same team that they were last year. They're going back to being regular old Tennessee. Alabama historically has had Tennessee's number, and I expect them not only to win. I think that they'll win very convincingly, playing at home with revenge in their eyes, and with a Tennessee team that only has one loss, but I believe will end up with probably 3 or 4 losses from the end of the season. So I like Alabama in this one.
Yeah, how about you, Trent?
I said in the offseason pod, I have zero clue why everybody thinks Joe Milton is like the next big thing. He threw the ball 80 yards one time. I said that big arm does not translate to good quarterback. And I don't want to say I was right, but I was right. He's been subpar, to say the least, this season for Tennessee. And I wanted – every part of me wanted to pick Old Smoky to win this game. But I just don't think Milton is going to be the answer. I think it's going to be too tough to win with him at quarterback. Milroe has just been a little more consistent than him this season. And for that reason, I'm going to take Bama. And like Alec mentioned, I think Bama had a chip on their shoulder, not just because of the way they played the season, but because of the Tennessee game last year and the heartbreak from that. So I like Alabama here.
Yeah, I'm going to make it short and sweet. I have Alabama as well. They're getting on a right note here. Obviously, this hurts me as I chose Milton to win the Heisman beginning of the year. I fell over the hype. I fell in love with the big 85-yard pass down the field. Obviously, you still got to hit the guys to make the play. So I'm taking Alabama here, but I got some love for Tennessee at the end of the year when we talk about a certain game. So, yeah, give me Alabama.
They don't call him Overthrow Joe for nothing.
Okay? Yeah. It's I completely fell in love with that, and obviously a backburn, and so did it for a lot of other people. All right, guys. Let's get to another game here, and I wish I could sound the sirens off. I think we are all in agreement on our pick here, but we're gonna talk about it for a second. That is Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss going into Auburn. I see trouble brewing here, and I'll get it started. I like Jackson Dart. I love Lane Kiffin as a coach. I think he's one of the more entertaining coaches in college football. I think he's great for college football. Great offense. Can arguably say has one of the best offenses in college football. With that being said, going into Auburn's a tough environment. They don't have that big one yet. They've come close a couple of times, almost against Georgia. almost against the other couple other team. This is I think going to be Hughes Freeze first signature win at Auburn. I think he's going to win at home and beat the 13 ranked Ole Miss. And with that said, Alec, I'll let you go next.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Robert. Lane and Ole Miss, they last season they did this. I believe they did it the season before, where they kind of start out hot, beating teams that they should be beating. They get into the meat of their schedule in October and November, and they really tank. It's not like, oh, they struggle a little bit. They tank, and they lose consecutive games. And, Auburn is just getting started. We've seen flashes from them this year of good gameplay and they brought in some good people in the transfer portal when Hugh Freeze came. I think that they're going to end up doing well over the years under Freeze's tenure. And considering that the game is at Auburn, that's a big piece too. It's not an easy place to play. The fans will show out. They're loyal fans, regardless of how off the team might be this year. It's tough. I'm not sure if I want to pick the upset because I don't think that Auburn is great at the quarterback position, and offensively they've really struggled. It would have to be one of their hot games. If they are playing well, I think they can win. I'm gonna pick Auburn to win. Yeah.
All right.
I just don't feel it with Ole Miss and with Lane. I would never expect them to have a 10 or 11 win season because of based off what I've seen in previous years. So I think if you're gonna pick an upset, this would probably be the one to pick this week.
Yep, Alec. Yeah, you're completely right, man. And I love it, dude, because I get all the nicknames from you, as you like to say it, the Lane Train. It's not. I think it's going to come to a stop here. So, how about you, Trent?
Yeah, this game's got upset written all over it for a lot of reasons. Like Alex said, the Ole Miss and Lane roller coaster usually comes to a halt at some point. And we've seen Auburn can play well in big games this year. However, we did see Auburn get their pants pulled down by LSU last week, just got smacked in the mouth, didn't show up, got embarrassed. But it's kind of a matter of which Auburn team's going to show up. It's a night game at home. I'm going to pick Auburn here just because it's a big game. They at home. We've seen them play well against good teams. But I'm going to say this: if Auburn doesn't win this game, it's going to be because Ole Miss blows them out. So the two scenarios: it's Auburn wins, or Ole Miss just comes in guns blazing and absolutely annihilates them, which honestly wouldn't surprise me. But I'm going to pick Auburn. I think that they'll pull off the upset. But I'm just saying, Ole Miss could blow them out.
Yeah. You're completely right. By the way, Auburn is one of the better home fan bases in college football. It is a night game that is very scary for Ole Miss. I completely agree with you, Trent. It's either going to be a blowout or Auburn wins. I don't think it's going to be in the middle here. It's going to be interesting, man. This is a game that Lane Kiffin needs to win because he's always had these kind of games where it turns around a season and it goes to the dumpster. So if he can win this game, they're going to be in conversation to maybe creep into that top four at the end of the year, or at least get themselves in the conversation for the SEC championship game. So it's a huge game for Lane Kiffin and that team. And honestly, he kind of needs a signature win, man. He needs to start putting some wins together, get him in that conversation. That's why they hired him. That's why he's one of the higher paid coaches in college football. We all know the offense, but these are games you got to win now. I mean, the first couple of years it was cute, but now he's really got to start winning these games. So it's a big test for Ole Miss. I hope they can pull off.
I just add one thing about Lane Kiffin. When he was at FAU, they didn't really play anyone, but I don't think they had any big upset wins. When he was coach of Tennessee, he said in his opening press conference he can't wait to sing Rocky Top after they beat Florida. They never beat Florida. He comes in and people buy in. He doesn't really say it, but people just assume because he's a great offensive mind that he's going to be a great head coach. He's a phenomenal OC with Alabama. They won a national championship, I believe. And it doesn't translate to leading a team as a head coach and a manager. And I think that's the reason why that they haven't been able to win this big game, because you need a little bit of inspiration, and I don't know if he's the guy to give it to them. So that's my final piece there.
All right. We're gonna wrap it up here soon. Two more games, we're out of here. Let's quickly get to Duke, Florida State. Florida State is ranked 4. That was just to mention, not to brag or anything, but that was Trent and my pick to make the college football playoff. It's looking pretty good right now. Not looking good for the guys wearing their actual jersey, but look, Duke, I think gets Riley Leonard back this week. Going into Florida State, it's a big test of Florida State, Alec, as you know. These are the kind of games you can lose if you don't pay attention, but it is at home. If Riley Leonard does play this game, he's obviously not going to be 100%. I do expect him to win this game, but I would be a little nervous about it. But Alec, what are your quick thoughts on this game?
Gonna be one of the best defenses we play all year. Clemson had a pretty good defense. LSU's defense doesn't look too good after we played them. You know, we did really well against LSU. Mike Elko, great head coach, doing great things at Duke. The game is at night in Doak, and that's going to give us an edge, I believe. But this is going to be a tough one to win, and it'll kind of define this Florida State team, how we come out of this game. You know, if it's a close one and we pull away, I'll be happy. But if we're talking about playoff run, we're going to need to win convincingly, especially considering that Duke may or may not have their quarterback. If they do, he would be hobbled, but we don't even know if he's going to play. Duke did just fine against NC State last week without their quarterback. Not to say NC State's really good, but I like the Noles at home. And you know, like I said, this game's kind of paved the way for the rest of our season, depending on how we play in this game. But I think that we have enough to come out of this victorious.
Yeah, and Alec, and let's not. FSU is legitimately a great team. I mean, these are games they should win. If you have championship aspirations, this is another test for you guys that I think you'll pass. So, Trent, what are your quick thoughts on FSU?
I think before Riley Leonard got hurt, this would be a game that everyone circled on a calendar. I think without Riley Leonard, it becomes just a little too difficult for Duke. But on top of that, since FSU beat Clemson, they're playing in rhythm right now. They're playing their best ball. I know that their last 2 teams have been inferior, but they've dominated like from start to finish. They're blowing these teams out the way they should. And we saw them struggle earlier. You know, teams like the likes of Boston College. Those days seem to be past us. Trey Benson had literally 200 yards on 11 carries against Virginia Tech. You're starting to see him play a little better. I have to pick Florida State here. 1, because obviously we had them in the CFP, but 2, they're just playing too good right now against a Duke team that isn't fully healthy. It will be tough. Like Alex said, Elko is a great defensive mind, and their defense is going to come to play. But I think FSU is just a little too much right now. Everybody's playing well on both sides of the ball. Everything's clicking. My one concern is the health of Jordan Travis. He's been having some issues with his shoulder. First time he hurt it was against Boston College. Re-injured it again last game. Was still able to fight through it and play. But who knows how long that's able to last. You know, if he gets hit again and for whatever reason that shoulder keeps him out, that's big problems. Their backup, who I think is Tate Roadmaker. Alec can correct me if I'm wrong. He's good enough to win some games. He did it last year, but without Jordan Travis, have no doubt, have no question, this is not a playoff team without Travis. So that's just one thing to keep an eye on. But for now, I still like them over Duke.
All right, Trent had to go. We're gonna finish some of the picks here of Alec. Wind this thing down here. All right, let's get into not really an interesting game, but more to give Alex to talk about a minute of Washington. That is Arizona State going into Washington. Obviously, Alec, we didn't get to talk about it earlier, but Penix was the Heisman favorite going into the Oregon game. We all saw what he did in Oregon. Both teams played very well, and both teams didn't deserve to lose, but there had to be a loser, and Washington came out and played well. But Penix was a story here. Made the biggest throws, big time throws, big NFL throws when they needed him most, and he got his team the dub in one of the biggest wins in a long, long time. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Penix led the way. I thought the defense played pretty well. Um, I'll speak a little bit more about the game, I guess, when we're talking about Oregon. But I think that Washington very well could have lost that game, uh, if not for a couple of things that happened. And not to say that that's a concern because I think Oregon is one of the better teams in college football. So it was a big win for the program, and obviously it was a showcase for Penix. I'm sure you guys talked about this, but he cemented himself as the Heisman favorite after that game. He really didn't have any slip ups. He seemed to be right, prepared for the game and was making big time plays when the game was on the line. That's really all you can ask for out of a quarterback. And they're playing Arizona State this week. Arizona State's having issues. They have a first year head coach. It's going to be a while before they're back and competing as a team. So I'm sure the Washington won't have a problem winning this game. They're going to have a couple of tougher games later down the road. But yeah, man, I'm just so impressed with Penix, and he's such an accurate passer. He's got phenomenal presence in the pocket, and any team that has to play him, is going to be very, very worried about how they're going to be able to contain him. And I think what we've learned is that it's almost impossible to. So I think they're going to be in the running for the playoff. They have a chance to beat every team that they play this year, but they do have a couple tougher teams later down the road. So we'll see how they respond. But I think they'll win this week.
Yeah, and Alec, I was mentioning with Trent earlier, I cannot wait to talk about the playoff scenarios and all the different things, kind of things that can happen. But the Pac-12, and Trent thought he'd never say it, is looking like the best conference in football, man. I mean, there's some legitimate teams, and it's just been fun game every week. But there is a world where I think that two teams can from the Pac-12 make the playoff. It's very, very realistic. It's gonna be a lot of fun to talk about. But you're right, man. Penix looks awesome. He made himself a lot of money last week, dude. He might go in the top 10 now, and it wouldn't shock me if he's a top 3 pick. That's how good he's been. It's crazy because I had no idea he went to Indiana, as we talked about last week, and now he's here. It shows you, man. It's what college football is all about. That environment, that win is why I love college football. Nothing ever beats that kind of sport here. In terms of the game, we're both going to take Washington. It's more just talk about Washington, not Arizona State. All due respect to them, but let's get to another game here, and that is Oregon at home at Washington State. Washington State had a really, really bad loss last week. They got blown out by Arizona, and no, we should have kind of saw that coming after what they did with USC, but not in terms of that. At home, Washington State was making some noise. They're a very well-run program, but they're going into Oregon. Oregon's ranked number 9. I think they should be a little bit higher. I'm not going to argue too much about it, but Oregon still has very legitimate playoff aspirations here. And if they want to get there, they got to win this game. But Alec, I'll give you the floor in Oregon. What do you think about them, and what do you think about this week for them?
Okay, so you guys got a chance to talk about this a little earlier about the Oregon-Washington game. I think that Oregon should have won the game. I think that they lost the game not because of Bo Nix, not because of their defense, but really because of Dan Lanning. I think that he made some very questionable calls all throughout the game. I'm not sure if you guys talked about this or not earlier, but I believe that they had 3 field goal opportunities within the 20-yard line, but a couple they were right there on the goal line where he opted to go for it on 4th down, and instead of settling for a field goal. And if he makes one of those, they're going to overtime. If he makes 2 of those, they're winning the game. He opted out of it. I don't disagree with the approach because it's definitely a trend in college football. I know that Mike Norvell is a big fan of going for it on 4th down, anything 4th and 5 and under. But the difference is you have to know when is the right time to do it. Another thing, they went for 2 on their first touchdown. It's like it's kind of gimmicky in my opinion, and you can't rely. You can't put the game on the line and have it be decided by 6 or 7, crazy going for it, risky calls like this. You're not. it's one thing you're gambling on one time or two times in a game, but to have it be part of your strategy, that was the reason why they lost the game. Another thing, they had the lead. They were winning by 4 points. They had the ball with under a minute left or under 2 minutes left, and it was fourth and whatever on their 50-yard line, and they go for it. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What, you punt the ball and you pin them back on the one, or even if it's touchback, they have to go 80 yards. They get stopped on 4th and 5 or whatever the hell it was, and Washington scores in 2 plays. The game was lost in the hands of Dan Lanning. Their team is very strong. They're a very well coached team, and it just came down to the play calling and the game management. And hopefully, something like this doesn't happen again this year, because I think that they're capable of winning out and making a playoff appearance. But I really hope that Dan Lanning learned from this experience, that sometimes it's the right thing to do to play it safe or to take the points, because they could have came out of that game victorious. And moving into this week, they're playing Washington State, who I think is kind of down in the dumps. They lost to Oregon State 2 weeks ago. They had a surprise blowout loss, like you said, against Arizona. And I think that Oregon is still the better team here, and they're deeper and they're stronger on both sides of the field. So I like Oregon to win the game. But make no mistake that the reason why they lost that game was 95% Dan Lanning's fault.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. Trent and I were talking about that earlier, and Trent basically made the same points. But look, I'm not going to rule out Oregon at all. They're still my playoff pick. I still think they can make the playoff. I still think they're that good. I mean, both teams deserve to win. One of them had to lose. I mean, it was just for the college football itself. I thought that was great atmosphere, great game. I think it was one of the most watched games that we've seen in a long time. I wouldn't hang my hat too much on the Oregon loss. I still think there's plenty of time for redemption. Great win for Washington. They're always hiding out there. No one really gets to watch their games. I'm glad that Penix was on prime time and was able to show off his skills along with Oregon. And you're completely right, man. My biggest rule always in sports, especially in football, is whether it's the NFL, whether it's especially in college football, always take the points on the road, man. At home, fine, but on the road, you got to take the points. And came back to haunt them. Hindsight's 2020, but we see a lot of coaches do this, and it always comes back to bite them in the ass. Excuse my language there, but yeah, man, happens. Any last words on Oregon?
No, I don't think that loss is defining of how their season's going to play out. I think that they play that game again, they'll probably win. And if the game was at home, they probably win.
Yep.
But sometimes it doesn't always go your way, and you catch some bad breaks. But to put yourself in a position 6, 7, 8 times in the game and to catch a bad break, that's going to end up the result being you losing the game. So
Yeah, correct.
Really learn from that experience.
All right, Alec. With that said, we're going to talk about one more game. This certainly intrigues me. I don't know about you. I'm going to stop with the jokes on Sarkmania because he's done pretty well. I'm not going to give him any crap for the Red River loss. That was a great game. Could have gone either way. But dude, I just can't get in the back of my head about Sarkisian's history of losing games that you expect him to blow out teams. And look, this game's in Texas. They're going to University of Houston. It is in Houston, I'm saying, but Houston, Texas, obviously. They're going to go up there. I think Texas expects to fully win. I don't blame them, but this University of Houston coach, I'm sure, is going to fire that team up. This is their college football playoff game for them right there. And I expect this to be a very close game. Whatever the line is, I'm taking the under. I think it's been very close, and it would not shock me if University of Houston pulls up an all-time upset here. I think this has a recipe for disaster. I know I've said that last couple of weeks. I've been wrong every time, but yeah, man, I'm taking Texas here, but I'm reluctantly making that pick. What do you think?
Yeah, it would have to be a game where they're caught off guard, because they played really well against Oklahoma. Unfortunately, they came out losing that game, but it was close. It's also a rivalry game. They played well against Alabama. And I'm sure that any, top dog team that they played, they have a chance to win the game. The problem is losing these games like you're not supposed to, and that's what Sark Mania is all about. That's the hump that he needs to get over. We talk about Franklin and Ryan Day. It's being able to finish a season all the way through being a strong football team. And Houston last week, they had a Hail Mary
Yeah.
win against West Virginia. So they're coming off a big high and they're rolling that momentum in this week. Texas had a bye last week, and that can go really well for a team. They're able to, get healthy again, have extra time to game plan. But in a lot of situations, the team goes cold during a bye week. So I'm just as curious as you are to see how they're going to show up in this game. Similar to Trent's analysis in the Ole Miss game earlier, it's either going to be a blowout on Texas's end, or if it's a close game, I could see Houston pulling it out. It's an in-state rivalry. But Houston, they have a great coach, Dana Holgerson. Great offensive mind, and they'll be able to pull. He'll be able to pull a couple of tricks out of his sleeve. But it's hard to pick the upset on this one. Like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if it did happen, but I think I'm going to pick Texas as well
Yeah.
to win this game because I do agree that this season their team is a little bit different, a little bit stronger than they have been in the past. But if they lose this game, then we're right back to
Yeah.
right back to square one.
Could get a tattoo on that on my back with that slogan. I will say this, man, when you have teams like that go with at home coming into your house, I don't care what you say, man. Whether it's me or anybody, you're gonna get extra motivated to play that game. Houston's gonna give everything they have. This isn't like Rice coming into town. This is not the number 8 Texas in Houston. I think it's gonna be a packed house there. I think everyone wants to watch that game. Um, it has all the recipes of a disaster for Texas. That's all I'm going to say. With that said, I do think Texas is going to win, but whatever the under is, I am taking it. I think it's going to be a very close game. And with that said, I'll probably win by 50 points. So you never know, man. Alec, like always, dude, next week we're going to start getting into all the college football playoff scenarios and teams, because after this week, we're going to start to get a real idea of who's legit, who's not, and all the crazy scenarios. I will tell you this right now. I think ever since the college football four team format has come out, this is as wide open as it ever gets. I've said it in the past. Last week, I'll say it this week. I think there's legitimately 15 teams that can get 4 spots. Maybe a little bit less than that, maybe 13 to 12, but it is wide open, Alec, for anyone. And I wouldn't bank my hat on Georgia making it either. I think there's trouble brewing for them as well. It is wide open for anyone. I don't think there's like a legitimate, you can say that team's going to win it for sure. With Brock Bowers going out for Georgia, that is a huge loss. We're talking about one of the greatest tight end prospects we've seen in a long time. That is Carson Beck's biggest weapon. He is the reason that they beat Auburn. Without Brock Bowers, they lose that game. So it's going to be very, very interesting down the road, Alec, when we talk about this next week.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, you were saying earlier about Florida State that they're a good team and they have a legitimate chance of making the playoff. I agree with you, but because this year is different than years past, there's really no two dominant teams. Michigan and Georgia, are the top 2 teams, but they've had their fair share of struggles. Um, anything's possible this year. Just when I look back and compare this FSU team to previous national championship teams, I don't see I don't see comparison. Like I think that we're lacking in some areas, but if in this year being so different, and it's anyone's to take. So it's all about getting through adversity for every team in the top 15 and just kind of staying strong and treating every game like it's your last game, and the teams who stay true to their system, they're going to be the ones that make it out in the end. But there's a lot that's going to unfold now that we're moving into the second half of the college football season.
Yeah, man. And look, this is the first time where every single team has questions about whether they can win or not, because every team does have questions. Without Bowers, Georgia's a completely different offense. And that is a huge loss for Carson Beck. I don't want to keep bringing up Georgia, but they are the 2-time national champions. They haven't lost a game in a while. I was a Georgia fan, I'd be a little concerned, man. I really would. He might be out for the year. Honestly, I don't see Powers coming back considering his draft status. And I don't think he wants to risk injury any further. So it's gonna be an interesting year, Alec. Can't wait to talk about it next week, man. With that said, guys, thanks for watching and supporting us. You can catch us on my podcast, on the YouTube channel, the YouTube podcast, 5 Reasons Sports Podcast. Thanks for all the support. Ratings keep going up. We appreciate it. All right. Have a good one, guys.